Hello. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. Still getting the theme song.
Right.
Like, hey, we got 2 theme songs. I don't know how that came across on the podcast. It's always fun to be confused on the air and not be sure if the audience is catching the same thing. But hi, I'm Russell Glasser. This is the Atheist Experience. With me today is Phil Sessions. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's everyone out there? Or how are you?
Good.
So you're the only one that can actually respond.
I'm good. We had our guest, and also, I guess I may as well mention, the ACA's new financial advisor on the air last week, Phil Session. The other Phil! What did I say? Just say Phil Ferguson.
We just all look the same.
Really nice guy. I listened to the show, and you know, it's always fun to hear a new voice. But it's good to be back. I don't think I've hosted in a few weeks at least. So, hi everybody. Today is March 26, 2017. We're a live call-in, internet-based atheist TV show broadcasting from Austin, Texas, dedicated to promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. You can catch us every Sunday live on YouTube or Ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-experience.com, and you can provide feedback for the show by going to freethoughtblogs.com/AXP. You can email us at tv@atheist-community.org, or you can join the Atheist Experience official discussion group on Facebook. And if you enjoy this show, then you should definitely also listen to The Nonprofits, which airs on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. You can find links from the Atheist Experience website, and the next Nonprofits will be recorded, not this week, but whenever, next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
First Wednesday of April, whenever
yeah.
that is. As always, if you are in Austin and would like to join the cast and crew, you can come along to Star of India at 2900 West Anderson Lane. We'll be arriving around 6:15 p.m. or so. And what's on your mind today?
Just transition right there.
What?
So just transition right there. Speaking of nonprofits.
Yeah, I don't believe in segues.
Whoa. But how is Jeff and Dennis Lubago? I haven't listened to the nonprofits in a while, but how are they?
I mean, they are fun as always.
That's cool.
I really enjoy getting to do both shows. And by the way, you'd be welcome anytime you wanted to show up. And I've never actually asked you to fill in, but we have, let's see, last week I was away on vacation, so Jeff's, Amanda, who has been on the show a couple of times before, filled in for us, and we've been getting pretty good feedback about her, so
Cool.
She's been with the ACA for many, many years.
One day I might just do that.
Yeah.
Let me see. There's a few things I want to touch on.
But you're not nearby most of the time.
No, it would be something that I would have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
Versus taking that hour trip for fill-in. But so yesterday, the ACA, we had our wheelchair ramp that we built here, and it was on the southern side of the central part of Austin. So,
are you guys doing that pretty much weekly?
That's every fourth Saturday for the ACA
okay.
Down there. I also do it down in San Antonio. That's on the second Saturdays usually.
Right.
In San Antonio, and for the ACA, it's the fourth Saturday. So we had some new faces.
Yeah.
That actually showed us some people that have never built ramps before ever. So they were just kind of standing around trying to figure out how to do things, but they got into the groove. It was pretty well done, honestly, and the weather was awesome.
And if anyone's bewildered about why we bring this up on the show, this is part of, I mean, you know, we reach out to both people who are listening internationally and also local Austin people, which is why we keep plugging dinner. And this is one of the sort of philanthropic activities that the ACA takes part in, and it's mostly, I mean, I'm not familiar with the full history of the wheelchair and ramp projects, but I feel like you've been spearheading it a lot. Is that right?
Yeah, I started in January 2006 in San Antonio, doing it down there. And I think I brought it to the ACA in May or June of 2016. And we've been doing it every fourth Saturday for the most part since then. So it's been a wonderful experience.
And you can always use local volunteers, am I right?
Oh yes, oh yes. Yeah. So that's goes into the next the next part I was gonna go into. As my usual case when I'm on the show, I'll announce different volunteer things that are coming up. So the next volunteer thing is actually coming next Sunday. As a matter of fact, it'll be cleaning up one of our adopted streets in Austin. We have two sections of streets in Austin that the ACA has adopted through the Keep Austin Beautiful program. And so we'll be cleaning our north location, which is not too far from this building, as a matter of fact. So we'll start at 7901 Burnett. So we start at Burnett and Anderson Lane, and we clean about a half mile down Burnett, turn around at Olin Street, and then come right back. So that's our half mile stretch, and then we'll take a picture in front of our Atheist Community of Austin sign, which is spelled correctly.
That's good.
Up there now. So that'll be next Sunday.
Let me guess. Did it used to say Atheist?
That's exactly what it was.
That's what everybody screws up.
And it was on there for
even
months.
other atheists.
But yeah, so that'll be going on next Sunday, and also coming up in April, later on in April, of course, the fourth Saturday of April will be the next Texas Ramps project. So if you want information about how to join in for these, or just information about what the program is about and what you can expect to see from it, you can visit either our website. I post the information on there, our meetup page, or Facebook. All have events that have details letting you know how you can get involved and what you can expect and ask questions if you have any.
Is that the
concern.
Atheist Community of Austin Facebook group?
Yes.
Okay. If you're local, you should join that, as well as the Atheist Experience official discussion group. If you're not local, maybe you don't want to clutter up the actual organization group, because it might have a lot of stuff you're not interested in. But I mean, join all you want.
There's some good information going along in there. But yeah, so that's coming up the fourth Saturday of April, and in May, on May 13th, let me back up a little bit. In March, we had our first food bank thing for the ACA, where we actually, it was a group of 6 of us, I believe. Total went out to the Central Texas Food Bank here in Austin, and it was a blast. It was very wonderful. They put on like loud music, so you're supposed to be getting pumped as you're doing your work in the warehouse side of things, and so that was fun. So I wanted to schedule another time because the volunteers that came out really enjoyed it, and we also had a family that came out with their young child as well, because it's open to ages 8-year-old and up. So if there's any families in the local area, you can actually bring them to that event, and they can join in. I think they had the kids on the chip and crackers aisle, like packing boxes on that side. So that'll be March 13th. And like I said, all this information, look on any one of our portals, the event side of it at the very least, on the ACA Facebook or Meetup page, and online for all that information. And lastly, at the end of April, April 30th, the Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless will be doing another giveaway for folks in the downtown area. That's at 7th Street and I-35, right here in downtown Austin, as a matter of fact. So if you want any information about that, look us up on Facebook, or you can visit the Austin Atheists Helping the Homeless website at austinahh.org to get more information to see how you can help out on that side. So, and I think the only other thing that I had was the United Coalition of Reason app. That is a very new thing. If those that don't know, this past week, I believe it was this past week, the United Coalition of Reason released a new app. And this app actually helps people to find out events starting from secular organizations in your particular area. So if you look up Austin, for example, then it'll show things like the Austin Oasis meetings that are happening now, and the cleanups, things of that sort. So Dallas-Fort Worth, which is so many activities going on in Dallas-Fort Worth and Houston area, stuff like that. So if you're a secular organization and your information is not on the UCORE app, you can actually contact them and provide them some information so they can incorporate your schedule. So if you're a smaller operation or you're just trying to kind of put yourself out there, trying to get a new avenue for other people to find you just in general, then you can submit your information there. And for those that are interested of trying to find someone, trying to have some fellowship, or trying to have someone that you can just meet up with, at a bar or have a drink or a family event with your area that's secularly minded, then you may want to go ahead and try to download it and see if they have your area on there, and if there's any organizations that you may not have been aware of in your area. So it's
because
pretty interesting.
We're not just about rowdy arguments with Christians. We're also about bringing people together.
Indeed.
So yeah, wherever you are.
So
look out for opportunities to hang out with fellow atheists, because believe it or not, it's fun.
I enjoy myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all for me. So
okay.
That's all.
I felt like mentioning briefly that I was taking a vacation in Orlando with a bunch of my family members last week while Phil and Tracy were doing a bang-up job on the show.
The other Phil.
The other Phil. And I have a fondness for the glitz and cheesy tourist stuff of the whole Disney package. Although I gotta say, so we were back there for the first time in 5 years after we had a honeymoon there, and I just want to say this is the second time I've gone and noticed all the signs for the Holy Land Experience, which is its own non-Disney theme park. And
really?
As much as I don't really want to give publicity to something like that, I have to admit, one of these years I'd really like to check that out and give a report, because
I've never heard of that place.
No, it's a full-on simulated. I mean, I don't know how well it compares to. I mean, at Disney you can see stunt shows with Indiana Jones actors and do virtual Star Wars rides, and Universal has that amazing Harry Potter stuff.
Right?
Yeah,
Yes. It looks so amazing.
Cool. I don't know how the Holy Land Experience compares.
That will be an interesting.
I don't know if it's better or worse than the Ken Ham Ark Park, which I've never been to also. But I would find it hilarious to go to one of these days. If you are an atheist who has been to the Holy Land Experience in Orlando, feel free to email and let me know what you thought.
I'd be curious about that as well.
Or email the nonprofits. We might make a segment of it because we do a lot of viewer mail or listener. Anyway, I've taken up enough of the audience's time. I know they can be rabid about getting people on the air. So who am I taking first? Well, this line is blinking, and it's Gerard in Connecticut.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Russell. How you guys doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So what I want to talk about today is the ideas that made me actually transition from being an atheist to call myself agnostic.
Oops, we lost one. Curses!
What was that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. And the main idea is simply that when I started thinking of games as their own kind of universes.
Uh-huh.
And so the reason why that is because, well, Russell, you play video games a lot and stuff, right?
I actually work for an unspecified game company, and I am a lifelong gaming nerd. So yeah.
So you've probably had this idea before, right? Like games with their own worlds and things like that.
Right. Sure. I mean, dude, what if the universe is a big video game, man?
Yeah. So
The Sims
I'm
all
just
over
curious,
again.
Before I start, what your kind of idea of that is? Obviously, you don't take it too seriously, I would imagine.
I mean, there's a difference between. I mean, obviously, I'm not only a gamer, but I'm a science fiction enthusiast, and there are plenty of cool sci-fi stories that explore the idea that the whole world could basically, without your knowing it, be part of some kind of virtual world that was created by something else. But there's a difference between getting your mind around those concepts as an interesting possibility and finding them plausible or likely. And I wonder what made you, I wonder if you have taken that jump from thinking that could happen, it would be cool, to that's probably true. I don't know where you're at with that.
So where I'm at is, I think I'm at the somewhat plausible side of the.
Okay, why?
Spectrum.
I mean,
Yeah.
do you think? Do you understand the idea that when you commit to believing in something, it should be grounded in some kind of demonstrable evidence of some sort?
Yes, and that I'm not sure how you would define evidence, but what I'm going to talk about now is sort of what I would consider a type of evidence for it.
Okay.
All right, so what that is basically when you take a game and you strip it down to like what a game really is. The fundamental nature of a game is just a set of rules, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and if we look at the universe, if we strip that down, that seems to be just a set of rules also.
That's
right?
a
Because
really thin connection that you're making.
they're both.
I mean, there are all kinds of logical fallacies that deal in making connections that aren't there. I mean, there is what's basically a syllogism, which means that if A is B, if all A's are B and all B's are C, then all A's are definitely C, right? But if you say all A's are like something and all B's are like something, that doesn't mean that A and B are the same thing. That's like faulty reasoning. So you need a little more than that to jump to actual conclusions about the universe really being a simulation. Because coming up with vague, superficial similarities between them doesn't actually make them the same thing. I'm trying to think of a good metaphor that would... it's like saying all cats have 4 legs and all dogs have 4 legs, and therefore all cats are dogs. It doesn't follow.
Yeah. So, what was it about? That was the beginning of how I thought about it. And as I explored it, I found some more connections that made it seem more plausible, which is what you might think another big leap is that games are also a mathematical structure, right? When I say games are made up of rules, that's kind of just saying, that's establishing axioms and, creating a system from those. And that's how you get the game, right?
Sure. Usually when you're developing a game, and Jeff D on the Nonprofits would be a great one to talk about this because he is, in fact, a game designer.
Yeah.
But, when you're coming up with a game, you are generally start from a set of rules with an intention in mind, like, how can I make this game as fun and streamlined as possible? I don't necessarily see that as the case with the entire universe. If anything, I would say that mathematics is a set of tools that we came up to describe the stuff that we already saw in the universe, and the representation that we have of the universe is at best sort of an imperfect, simulated understanding of as much as we know so far.
Yes.
So, I think it would be wrong to reduce the entire universe down to some oversimplified set of rules that are based on things that we've figured out.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing the real connection. I know you're trying to kind of analogize the rules of the game. The game has these rules in this environment, and it seems like you're kind of playing that onto the universe itself. But the difference is we have lots of examples of game design. We have books on it, we have lots of examples of that portion. We don't have any examples of a universe that goes by that same type of deal. So I was trying to see where you're kind of analogizing them together, like that, in order for you to, as you say, go from identifying as atheist to agnostic, which was another question, but I'll leave that for another time.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is move a little away from games specifically as the analogy, because the purpose of what I just said, how games are basically a mathematical system, is to extract it to not games, but mathematics, which is what, Russell, you were sort of getting into. Now, I am somewhat of a Platonist, in that I think there's, like, Platonist.
Oh.
In the sense that mathematics is, like,
you mean
natural.
Believing that there are ideal forms of some sort?
Not
not just believing that those ideal forms are concepts, but believing that they have their own existence in some sense. You didn't call back. You didn't call last week, did you? Because I feel like when I was listening to Phil Ferguson, at least 2 different people called and wanted to talk about Plato's ideal forms. So I wonder if this is some kind of fad going on right now. Because we don't get.
I watched last week's show, but I didn't. I guess I forgot because I didn't notice that.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of cosmological argument talk or something, but. But yeah, no. I feel like it's actually more accurate to say that I'm not Platonist, but I have like the heart of a Platonist, because I don't believe in like those ideal forms, like that Platonist think, but I view math as like the most fundamental and natural, like thing, sort of.
Okay.
And that's simply because how effective it is. You said we use it as a tool, but there are a lot of ways in which we discover like rules and truths about the world, and then we formalize them into our own language, which is what we call mathematics, right?
Okay, but I mean, I'm still having trouble seeing the connection between, this idea that games and universes both have rules.
Don't think about games right now.
What? Okay.
The games was the beginning.
Okay, but what does any of this have to do with a god, for instance? Because you said you stopped being an atheist, so you must have some opinion about, like, some kind of cosmic designer or something.
Okay, so that's there are other levels there, but what this all leads to is our world being a mathematical system in itself, which, by the way, isn't just like, it's not like a idea that's never been thought before. That's a kind of idea that's out there. And the same way we see mathematical systems created in our world, like game, for example, it seems possible, first of all, that our universe is just some mathematical system within some higher reality, the way games and that.
So you're saying there's a dude in another universe who's a game designer, and you think this is probably true because math, basically.
When it comes to God, and there being an intelligent designer, that I'm not very sure about.
Okay.
That's why I go.
So presumably there's a higher order. I mean, let's say that you're right. Presumably there's then a higher order universe which is also, outside this and completely contains this universe. Is that universe also a game in yet another universe? Is it turtles all the way down, as the saying goes, or what's your end point? Do you think that there's an actual universe that's not a simulation?
I don't think it has to be.
So you think we are in an infinitely nested universe of games and games and games?
No, that doesn't have to be the case.
Okay, good, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm just trying to follow where your reasoning goes, because you're not, when I asked what's your evidence, you're not pointing to any specific feature of our universe. You're just saying, in general, because of math, the universe has to be in another universe. So I'm just trying to figure out if that applies to that universe up there also. Or do you think that universe doesn't have consistency and rules and is just complete anarchy with unicorns and dinosaurs and Winston Churchill?
Have you heard of Max Tegmark? Do you know Max Tegmark?
What?
Do you know Max Tegmark? Have you heard of him?
No.
Mm-mm.
He's a physicist at MIT, and he has his own theory of the multiverse. And his theory is that
I don't call those things theories,
reality,
by the way, because they're really hard to test. Usually, a theory implies that they're a well-organized framework, but they tend to be just, blowing smoke and not testable, which is why they're not generally accepted as scientific knowledge.
Right. I was using a more colloquial version of it.
Okay. Well,
theory.
I mean, sorry to be nitpicky, but people throw around the word theory a lot.
Yeah.
But Gerard, I also want to ask another question. When you originally got on the call, you said that you stopped identifying as atheist and started identifying as agnostic. What, in your mind, what exactly was the difference of those two? How do you perceive those two words and their difference enough for you to identify as one and not the other?
Well, at first I didn't. It was just a feeling, like I wasn't sure why at first. I just had the feeling of I can't be an atheist anymore, or I'm not an atheist anymore.
So to you, what is an atheist?
Well, I mean, there's no one definition for atheist, but there's a way I think about it, which doesn't apply to me. And one of the ways I think about it.
Is it something besides a lack of theism? Is it something outside of that, like your own definition? Or theism. I'm sorry?
So what made me an atheist, I'll say it this way. What made me an atheist, which I learned later, was that I believed that no God existed. That's what made me an atheist.
Right, but that's not the an exclusive definition of atheist. An atheist is just someone who doesn't believe in God.
I'm not claiming it to be the definition, but I'm saying that's what made me. That's how I thought of myself and knew myself as an atheist. And when I came to this, to coming up with these ideas, I came to a point where I didn't believe that no God existed.
Okay, but do you believe that a God does exist?
Right.
No.
Then you're still an atheist.
Yeah.
I mean, you are just a more, what's referred to in some cases as a weak atheist.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I don't know if I like that term, but yeah.
Or just agnostic atheist.
Sure.
Like you don't make a claim to knowledge, but you currently lack a belief in a deity or deities. So.
Right, because I mean, you want to be careful of drawing a distinction between leaving open possibilities for something to exist and actually believing that that thing exists, because that's all that atheist necessarily means.
Did you hear what I repeated 3 times?
Go ahead and repeat it a fourth, but
sure.
we're gonna move on from this call pretty soon. Just giving you a heads up.
So sure, I'll finish with this. So all that's said by your definition, because Matt says this a lot. Words have different usages.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is one problem I have with how. I'm not getting into that, but yeah. So there are different usages of atheist. So by most usages of atheist, I would be an atheist because I lack belief in God.
Okay.
I don't follow that usage. It doesn't.
Well, Okay, but you
So
don't
I
get to
have my own
dictate
usage,
what
and that's why
other
I
people use.
call myself. What?
I mean, okay, but you don't get to dictate what other people use. I mean, we're now
I'm not
arguing over
dictating.
what the word means, and I don't know that that's useful.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm not saying you can't call me an atheist, but I'm just saying by your definition. That's
Okay.
your definition. I have a different one.
But I think it would be helpful in the future to, if you're using a non-standard definition, to better identify what exactly you mean by that, so that
Agnostic isn't really non-standard. There are a lot of people that call themselves agnostic.
Sure. But you, like, as far as your definition of what atheist, I mean, that's what I was trying to get together, because I didn't quite understand how you were drawing that distinction on there. But I'm just saying, for future reference, it may be helpful to better explain your frame of reference when you're going for those two identities, at least for someone else that may have a different idea of what those words mean. That may lead to some muddling of that conversation a bit. So
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Anyway, we're going to pick up another caller. Thanks for getting in touch, Gerard.
Okay, thanks for talking.
all right, have a good weekend.
Bye.
Just a little bit that's left.
Matthew in New Orleans. How are you?
Oh, hey, how y'all doing?
Hey, I'm
Doing
good.
well.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. I was calling because I'm a theist. I believe in God, and I was in the military. I was in the Marines for 8 years. I was deployed overseas, and some of the things that I've experienced over there, and some things that I've seen. I mean, it led me to believe that for me to come home without a scratch on me, I mean, what more can it be than God watching over me? Because, I would pray before I would go out there to do anything. And, and he brought me back home, but at the same time, I question that because there were other people that prayed just like me that didn't make it back. So, it's things like that that make me wonder, but it's confusing because I know God has a plan for everybody, and it made me wonder what his plan is, but apparently he has some type of plan for me because I was able to make it home. I mean, so how do I...
Can I ask you something? And I'm asking actually from a position of ignorance because I'm not in the military and don't follow it very carefully. But do you have any concept of what is the rate at which military members get killed or injured in their entire term of duty? Like, is it...
In their entire
I mean,
term
is
of
it
duty?
closer to 20%, 50%, or 80%? I mean,
that's a good question. I wouldn't know that. I could just talk about, when I was overseas.
Okay.
We did lose a couple of guys.
a couple of guys. Out of how many?
One is enough, but
Yeah, and
but
of course, every human life lost is a tragedy. But I mean, a couple of guys lost out of how many?
out of a good bit. I would say within my unit, probably was more than 80 or more.
80. So that is a rate of, let's see, I would guess a bit less than 2% of people actually died. How many of the people you served with would you say got injured?
Quite a few. I would say if they did have 80, of those 80, probably I would say about maybe 15 to
so that's
20.
Yeah, so maybe 20% of them got injured. So if you're in Iraq, or I'm sorry, you didn't say where you were stationed, but
all right.
Right, but if you are away on active military duty, you have roughly an 80% chance of living and coming home with no injuries. Is that right?
If you put it that way, I guess.
So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily attribute that to a special plan for you. I would say, a 20% chance of serious injury is not nothing, and good for you for coming home without injury. But I also wouldn't consider it a good case for special protection for you.
Okay, so but what I'm saying is, I've been in situations to where if I would have probably moved 1 inch to the right, 1 inch to the left, that could have been the end of me. And
wouldn't that
I
be
feel as
also
though
true
and
of
during those times,
lots
I
of
felt like it
people?
was like an intervention, like something told me or something stopped me from doing this particular thing that would have ended my life. So I'm like, what? I mean, is that just chance? I mean, it's hard to think that it's just chance because and like I said, I question. I'm questioning things at this point in my life right now. So I'm like, what more can it be? I've lived my entire life believing in God. I feel as though I've gotten to this point in my life because of His blessings. And going through those things. And right now, I'm a police officer, so I get in some heavy situations in that job too. And for some reason, I'm still here. Through all these things that I'm going through, I'm still here. So what more? I mean, am I just that lucky?
Well, Matthew, hi, this is Phil here. I just had one point to make. As Russell said, I'm glad to hear that you returned home safe and sound, and thank you for your service. But you were saying that the fact that you returned and without a scratch, that that means that God had a plan for you. But you saying that, what does that say about that 20% who didn't get as lucky as you to be able to make it back either at all or without injury?
And that's the part that troubles me, because there were people that were over there praying just like me, and it makes me wonder. It's like, okay, why is He showing me, in my mind, why is He showing me favor over this guy? Because I'm like, okay, this guy may have been a better person than me, but He allowed this guy to die right here, but allowed me to go home for some reason. So, when I see things like that, I'm like, okay, there must be some type of plan for me. I mean, but at the same time, it makes me think, what part of God's plan, made sense? What part of what was God's plan for this guy to die?
So I understand why you think that. I mean, for a couple of reasons. It's cultural, and people tell you that that there is a God and He's looking out for people. And the other thing is that if it turns out that the all-powerful Creator of the universe has a special plan for you, that makes you feel pretty special, right? I mean. And so I can understand why it feels good, and you want to think that it's not just luck. But I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's really not even all that amazing of luck. I'm sure that lots and lots of people have close shaves in their life. I mean, when I was young and a stupid teenager who wasn't that good at driving, I drove on some icy roads on a very steep mountain path, and I kind of skidded for a while and then came to a stop without driving off a cliff, which is lucky, but it didn't make me feel like I got rescued. It just meant things could have gone another way, but fortunately they didn't. And I mean, as much as you might not want to think so, it could just be statistics.
And
I
Matthew,
understand where you're coming from.
Matthew, okay.
I understand.
But I was just about to say, but it also, the people that served with you and alongside you, people that are still there now, and those that are just getting into it. Just this morning, I was at the Lackland Air Force Base at the Atheist Humanist meeting, where we have a large field of religious beliefs in that portion. But you're saying that you were attributing this to, your God, your specific one that you believe in, but a lot of the people that you serve with don't believe in any deity at all. They may believe in different deity or deities, depending on what's going on. Like in the meeting I was just in, we had people that were followers of the Norse religion. We had pagan Wiccans. Yeah, it's really there.
There are definitely Muslims in the army.
Right.
I mean, Captain Khan, who was kind of high, whose death was highly visible.
Right.
So what you're saying is that
you have all those different.
I'm saying that it's my God. It could, like, there are people that have other religions that may believe in something else, and they may say, "Oh, well, it was my God."
Right. How are we supposed to differentiate which deity had their hand in the pot? Like, how are we supposed to know which one actually granted you the favor in your opinion? Like, how are we supposed to discern which belief was correct and which deity or deity set came in to intervene for your particular situation?
And that's why I called, because staying here in New Orleans, in the South, basically, I don't have I can talk to people that believe in God all day.
Sure.
And
sure.
they tell me, I hear the same things from them. They reassure me and stuff like that. And it brings me comfort when I hear those things coming from them. I don't hardly ever get to speak to somebody that has a different point of view. So that's why I called, because I wanted some more insight on other possibilities, because I have a lot of questions. And I
Right.
don't get a lot of answers, and the answers that I'm getting, it feels like they're telling me these things because that's what they're programmed to say, And I wanted something that was more of a realistic answer from somebody that doesn't believe the same thing that they believe.
Yeah,
which is
and
why I called, because
it's
real confusing to me.
Right. And I know it may feel a little bit like we're picking on you, but I mean, that's a big part of the reason why we do the show, is that a lot of times people just are steeped in a culture where everything is attributed to supernatural causes, and they don't have a lot of opportunity to talk about the other side. And even though for some people it's frightening to give up on the idea that there's some cosmic being who's looking out for them, there are a lot of problems with that worldview, and even though a lot of people think that they would have no hope and no reason to live without this idea of God grounding them, what a lot of people find who sort of drift away from their faith is that it's actually kind of a relief to not assume that they're under the constant eye of this cosmic bookkeeper who's got inscrutable reasons for, let's say, killing their best friends on purpose.
And I understand where you're coming from as far as being in an environment where everyone kind of believes the same, and so you receive kind of the same reinforcement when you ask the question. Like I grew up religious, and everyone around me, both sides of the family, even though we went to different churches, they were still believers. And so when you would ask a deeper question, oh, why did so and so pass away? They were so young. Why did they have to go now? And then it was kind of the same answer. Well, God had a plan for him, and that was a part of His plan. You just have to trust and make sure that you hold on to your faith. Those were the answers that I received. And when I went to university, I was in an engineering program originally, and all of a sudden I was exposed to a lot of different individuals who hold vastly different beliefs than I had growing up. I knew that they existed, but never to this degree. And so, you befriend people and you start to hear about their religious symbols and their traditions and their foods, and which are delicious. In a lot of cases, but that diversity really opened up my mind into, there's a lot of people that believe a lot of different things, and like Hinduism, it was vastly different than anything that I was exposed to growing up. And so that kind of led my questioning initially when I got there to kind of pursue why my particular belief system was the true and correct one, and what about theirs? Theirs is so different that how could we couldn't both be true, essentially? So how was I going to decide which one is going to be correct?
I would question stuff like that about different religions, and I would hear things like, "Oh, it's just people. We all worship the same God. Other people have just different ways of doing it." And that's what I'm always told. But I understand everything that you're saying. But what makes it hard is basically the fact that I've lived my entire life believing in this one God, and then for me to even fathom or think that that He may not even exist, it makes me wonder, like, okay, well, what's going on in my life? Why are these things happening to me just by random chance? It's hard to think of a life without it. But I understand everything that you're saying, because this is why I have questions. Because at the same time, if there was such a God that was so good, and He's letting all these, and say for instance, good things happen to me, why does He let bad things happen to other people? Why doesn't He just have good things happen to everybody? I don't.
Yeah, and it's hard for a lot of people I know. I mean, I've talked to people who were like in their former life full-on Pentecostal ministers, like the actual heads of organizations that did stuff like speaking in tongues, and you know, their entire livelihood and their whole social foundation was based on them being able to say on a regular basis that they were confident and certain that God existed and that He had a thorough plan for the lives of each and every person in their congregation that they knew. And some of those people, when they moved away from their belief in God, they experienced a serious identity crisis. And had a hard time because basically their whole social network was based around these religious beliefs. And I don't want to downplay how difficult that is, but I do want to say that, and you know, I'm not trying to convert you or anything, but if the time should come where you feel doubt and concern about this, there are organizations like the Clergy Project that people can connect to for former clergy members to discuss their anxieties around their loss of faith, and there are things like
recovering from religion, recovering from a religion hotline.
The Recovering from Religion has a hotline for people that you can talk.
Organizations that help people that's going through a spell where they're not believing.
Yeah, and they're very good organizations, but I can't say that they will reassure you that a God exists. I mean, if you are trying to hold on to your faith, then these might not be the people that you want to talk to. But I personally,
I'm trying to hold on to it. It's because I don't have any. Because the other thing is, you know, I'm black, so you know, I stay in a predominantly black community, so. The fact that even fathom being an atheist at any point in my life, I could imagine the ridicule that I would get from that. Which is why when I have some of these questions, I don't ask certain people because I know what the outcome of that's going to be. So it's almost like even if you did want to get a way out, it's almost like you're trapped into it. Because if you were to speak about that to anybody, they'll be like, okay, how could you possibly not believe in God? How could you possibly question His motives? Everything God does is for a reason. Everything is a plan, and you just have to have faith and believe in that. Yeah. You know, that's what I'm always told, and that's you know, and I'm actually getting tired of that answer. You know, so, and to be honest with you, at this point in my life, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm like, okay, right now, if I did believe in God, at this point, I'm not really liking Him that much. You know, so right now, I'm just really confused about, you know, what's the next step that I should do? I mean, where do I go from here?
And you're dealing with two separate issues, and one of them is, does a God really exist or not? And, you know, that is... There's no way that we can give you an easy answer to that. But the other issue that you're probably dealing with is that in your social sphere, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Religious people, some of them can be cruel, and it can be very difficult. You know, I've spoken to kids whose parents basically disowned them and kicked them out of the house. That's an extreme case. It doesn't happen all the time.
That would have definitely been the case for me.
But on the other hand, there are probably a lot of people in your life, maybe, that you didn't know also have doubts. And you'd be surprised at how often I've heard that somebody who is afraid to tell their wife, for instance, that they don't believe anymore, got the answer, I'm really glad you said that because I've been hiding from you that I have doubts. So that kind of thing does happen. And I mentioned a minute ago the Hotline Project, which you can actually look up at recoveringfromreligion.org and then /hotline-project. Or if you just look up Recovering from Religion or Google Hotline Project and Atheist, you can probably find pretty easily. And we only have an hour and a half show every week, so we can't, you know, counsel you for a long time, but
I thank y'all for answering my call. Y'all gave me a lot to think about. Really helped me out, and maybe I'll be able to call again and give you an update of where I'll be at the next point.
I would love that, and I hope you do. And whatever conclusion you come to, I hope that you find peace and satisfaction in the way your life goes.
And I understand where you're coming from, Matthew, on that side of not being able to talk to anyone in your close familiar circle, your friend circle. Like there's a lot of backlash that can come, and just the way that that I grew up and the way that religion was exposed to me, and how those that are around me express themselves about their religion. It was unfathomable for me to even contemplate going to an aunt or an uncle to say like, so I, this is what I'm thinking now. I'm not really in a part of the Christian portion anymore. Like even when I went spiritual but non-religious, that aspect, I had one conversation with one person in my family, and that was the one person that I knew was like, we've always been close, and so they would be more willing to hear me out without the judgment that other people around me would have. And so if you're trying to find someone outside of that circle, like Russell said, I would strongly recommend like the Recovering from Religion, that Hotline project, because they do have counselors. They have a lot of trained individuals on there that help with people that are just doubting beliefs. They're not trying to convert you. They're not trying to do anything in particular, but just hear you out and give you someone to talk to, and someone that shares a different perspective than those that you might find around you, so you can get a fresh insight with someone, on a one-on-one personal level. And that's a little more personal than going through the interweb for this kind of thing. So
I'll definitely do that.
All right, but I wish you luck, Matthew, in your search, and just good luck to you.
Yeah, really appreciate your call.
Great talking to you guys.
All right, you too.
Thanks.
Bye. Kevin in Dallas. Hi.
Oh, detailed. Awesome.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I love the show, and I met Russell at ApostleCon in Dallas in 2015.
Oh yeah, that was a good time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Just to give you a bit of background, I listened to Dogma Debate, and one of his Christian apologist listeners was there and gave out his email address, and something he said irked me, so I emailed him.
Okay.
We started a discussion, and there were many avenues of discussion that we could take, but after reading How to Create an Atheist by Peter Boghossian, I decided I would try to waste as little time as possible and try to get him to realize that faith was an unreliable path to knowledge.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah. I started out by asking, as Matt does, if there's any position he could not take on faith, and he didn't understand this question. It took him a while to even understand my definition of faith, which is belief without sufficient evidence, because according to him, everything takes faith because we do not have absolute knowledge. We went around and around on our two definitions, and I intended to ask him why he departed from both the biblical definition and the dictionary definition. And as we were getting there, he said he thought we should end the conversation. So my question is how to proceed when you and atheists have a different definition of faith.
So I was on my high school debate team, and early on, I got in a debate where most of the back and forth argument was on arguing whose definition was right. This actually was a guy who was a senior when I was like a junior or something, and he was way more experienced than me. But I felt pretty good about how it had gone, but I got completely ripped. I mean, I was crushed by the judge. And I talked to another member of the team later, and they said, never waste time in an entire debate going round and round on definitions. There are so much more productive things you can be doing. And in my experience talking to lots and lots of people on this show, I've come to realize that one of the things that annoys the people you're talking to most and guarantees that you're not going to have a constructive decision or discussion is trying to tell them what they believe and putting words in their mouth and not listening to and understanding what they are telling you they believe. So, what do you believe and why isn't just a platitude. It's a way of opening a conversation because you have to actually make an effort to reach out to the other person and understand where they're coming from. And when you spend a lot of time just arguing about what definition they're using and say, no, you shouldn't use that definition, you should just come over to my definition, it's generally a communication breakdown because it doesn't advance the actual thing you want to talk about, which is what do they really believe? Like, forget the words that they're using. If they want to say, to take a typical example, atheism is just another religion, I used to argue, no, it's not. It's totally not a religion. But that doesn't go anywhere. And what I found is a better way to approach the question is saying something like, what do you mean when you say a religion? And you can listen to what they are trying to tell you, and you can ask them for clarification, but you can conditionally accept the words that they are using. You can note in passing, well, that's not the way I use the word, but sure, you could say under that very narrow definition of religion, I will grant you that atheism is a religion, so what? Or in your case, you were talking about the use of the word faith. Now, when I talk about faith, I generally say faith is a bad thing. And I would say that faith is overconfident belief in something that you have no good reason to believe. But you can discuss the idea of that without insisting that that person come around to your idea. I mean, conversation is a lot of give and take and trying to understand what they're really trying to tell you instead of just getting bogged down in what word they're using and whether you mean the same word, the same thing by that word as they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just, I had basically a game plan for how to get him to understand where I was trying to go, but I couldn't figure out why he thought the way he did, and he was not really explaining that. Like, I think, like, I kept on asking him questions, trying to get to understand his position better, and he would basically answer them really poorly, and it was very hard to get anywhere.
Right. Did you ever consider the possibility that he's just a bad communicator and it's not your fault? Like, you went into this trying to win and trying to change his mind and getting him to drop his theism, but I can tell you from experience that rarely works. It's a nice surprise when it does, but that shouldn't necessarily be your goal in every conversation.
Yes, and I was, I'd like to try to use that, the manual for creating atheists. I was basically trying to use this as a practice run, and it didn't work very well because I was stuck on a definition that made absolutely no sense, and I couldn't get him to tell me why he would go with that definition.
Right. Well, I'm not Peter Boghossian, and I have to admit I've flipped through his book, but I haven't read the whole thing. So, I mean, you'd maybe have to ask Peter why he thinks his approach didn't work, but maybe it just doesn't work. He's not infallible. Or maybe you weren't applying it right, but I'm not going to assume, I don't ever assume going into a conversation that there's a magic bullet that will convert somebody to an atheist, because if I thought that, then there would be a lot more atheists in the world.
Yes.
Yes, and I will also say, you said that that you had a plan going into this in particular, and that because of that definition, and that you I guess you couldn't come to grips with an agreeable definition of that word, it kind of threw off your plan. But I would also say in your future endeavors, trying to apply Peter's, that type of method, that epistemology type of method, that you may have to be a little bit more flexible in your conversations, not to expect that things are going to go according to that plan, and when they don't, you don't really have a way to recover. At that point, it's like, the definition, you got hung up on that, and because you did, the conversation couldn't really progress according to the plan that you had had, whether you adapted it from the book or if that's what the book had specified. But I would say just to be, I guess, a little less rigid on that portion, to be a little more flexible to actual conversation, trying to understand where that other individual is coming from. And there's no guarantee that that other individual is going to be able to explain themselves to your satisfaction. They may not have the vocabulary, have the words, or even know what it is that they really mean in order to relay that to you concretely so that you understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and if I were in your position, like, I might consider making an approach like, hey, I feel like we got off on the wrong foot and I was maybe coming across as too aggressive. Can we start over? Because even though it feels like a blow to the pride, there is nothing that flatters people more when you're talking to them than an admission that you were wrong about something. Or at least, you weren't necessarily wrong about the point you were trying to prove, but that you recognize that you took the wrong approach and put them off. And telling somebody, I really want to understand what you're coming from. Can we talk about it in this way?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say about just coming from an earnest position to say, I was really trying to understand where you were coming from when you were using the word faith, but I wasn't understanding the way you were explaining it to me. Could you try in another way because I really want to understand where you're coming from and really want to nail down what it is that you think faith is so that we can actually have a meaningful conversation going forward, and approaching it from that, not a combative way, just like, hey, I really want to understand. Like, I'm from an earnest position trying to understand what you're saying. Right.
And there's nothing wrong with just flat out saying, I don't agree with that. And not making it, you're absolutely wrong. Because even if you think that somebody is absolutely wrong, saying it in a way that personalizes it and saying, well, you could be right, but you're not convincing me. Like, if they don't care about convincing you, they just want to do mental masturbation and say the things they believe over and over again, maybe the conversation isn't going to go anywhere, and that's fine. You just take that as a lesson learned that, sometimes you just cut your losses and don't waste your time.
Yeah, that was part of my plan because there were multiple categories that we could discuss, but I thought if we could come to an agreement on this point, and I didn't know I knew that we would be talking past each other if we didn't agree on this point. So that's the main reason why I tried to stick on that point, because I thought we would be able to come to agreement on it, and I thought we were getting there, and then you said, we're not going to come to an agreement, basically.
Yeah, well, getting good at conversations with theists is an ongoing process, and you don't necessarily need to fixate on getting it right with one person. It's a battle, not the whole war, although it's not really a war necessarily. It's just trying to understand people and maybe make a positive impact on some people you meet as much as you can.
All right.
All right?
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you for calling. Who have we got on line 3? It's, no, I just talked to an atheist. I'm going with Jeff in Utah, has been waiting a long time. How are you, Jeff?
Yes, I'm doing well. And this is Russell and Phil, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
have
indeed.
we ever talked before?
Well, no, but I think 2 or 3 weeks ago I talked to Matt and John, and I don't know how to pronounce John's last name.
Iacoletti.
There we go.
Iacoletti.
Yikes, that's a doozy. Well, and it sounds narcissistic, but I've got YouTube here, and I watched the call with Matt and I many, many times.
Uh-huh.
And
I didn't watch the call, so maybe you can tell me how it ended.
Oh, well, okay, so I'm a Latter-day Saint, and I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe in the Bible and in the Book of Mormon, and also in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price. And I was talking with Matt, and he mentioned, let me put it this way. I spent too much time attempting to defend Joseph Smith. And that's not why I'm a Latter-day Saint, or more. Mormon is kind of a pejorative term, and I mentioned that last time. And I will say that Matt was very sharp. He knew quite a bit, but
he can. Yeah.
What's difficult for me is I've only been a Latter-day Saint for a little over a year.
Oh, what were you before?
I was a Baptist for a while.
Okay. So you went from one set of beliefs about God to another one?
Well, yes.
Okay.
But what happened is, my parents divorced, and my dad went to one church, and my mom just didn't go, and I was with my dad and my stepmom went to a different church, and so I can't even remember what it was, but I'm pretty sure she was Baptist, some kind, and I know they have different.
Well,
all kinds of different
we've got
variations.
20 minutes left in the show. I don't need your whole life story. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to be rude.
And I have a tendency to ramble. I even recommended that Matt see The Rock last time I talked to him. I mean, we talked to Rock a while.
The one with
Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery.
Yeah.
I mentioned it as an example. I used it as an example.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I forget Mormonism for a moment. I think that Christianity is valid as a belief system, and
why?
And that was when I talked to Matt, we focused too much on Joseph Smith, and really Joseph Smith is no one.
All right, fine. Clean slate. You believe that the Christian God exists because?
Oh well, I pray. And I'm assuming, and I think it's a healthy assumption, that neither of you pray. But I
generally
pray,
no, yeah.
When I pray, and I pray daily, and when I do, I feel the comfort of the Holy Ghost, and I feel the love of my Heavenly Father, our Heavenly Father. He's not just mine; He's yours as well. He's the Father of our spirits. And I'm sensing some incredulity. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's not like I'm that incredulous. It's nothing that I haven't heard before. So I believe that you have been taught that when you say some words, the all-powerful creator of the universe is listening to you and cares deeply about your life. And I believe you when you say that when you say these words, you feel the emotional impact of that belief, and it makes you feel good that somebody is paying attention to you out there. But I don't actually believe that that there is a cosmic person listening to you. I think it's just your background beliefs influencing the way you feel.
Well, now, have you tried to pray? Have you reached out?
Sure, that's why I say not generally. I mean, I've been an atheist all my life, but I've tried experimental prayer, and nothing really happened.
And I was raised as a Baptist Christian, a Southern Baptist Christian for all of my young life and young adult life, and I went into college still as a believer on that side, and we prayed. Oh, there was so many services that we went to. Services, prayers.
I'm sure you counted it up.
It's been a long time. But what comes to my mind now, which is the same question I kind of asked myself when I guess I mentioned it earlier, when I got to school at a university and seeing so many other people that believed in completely different belief systems than mine, but they believed them just as strongly as I believed in the one I had, the one I was introduced and brought up to believe my entire time. And they felt just as strongly that theirs was true, and that whether they were Hindu, the ones that were Muslim, others that were, it's some, I guess it was Native American, or I'm not sure if I'm sure there's a word there that I'm probably forgetting, all that stuff, but they believed it just as fervently. And so I couldn't justify my belief, even though I felt that this was real. I was, like I said, taught this all throughout my childhood. I felt the Spirit when I was in church. Wow, these earbuds are terrible. I felt the Spirit when I was in church. Well. When songs were being played, I would be there. I would be up. I'd be clapping. There were a lot of noise-making material, so tambourines and blocks and everything, especially in the free church that I was a part of. And you felt that portion, and that's what I thought. It was real for me. It was really, like, I couldn't deny it. I felt good after it. I wanted more of it, which I loved, like the longer services that we had that would drone on for about 5, 6, 7 hours, just depending on. Yeah, it just depended. But it was just a good, like, it was a good feeling, and I don't doubt that those feelings that I felt, like, I recognize them now that they were real. By the same token, that was what I was brought up to believe was correct. This is what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to be in the Spirit. You're supposed to, give yourself up to the Lord and, catch the Holy Spirit. And that's what I grew up. But then going to a different service when I was in university and seeing the completely different portions that they traditions that they adhere to.
Service?
No, this one was a is it Hindi or Hindu service that I went, and I was able to not participate in, but watch from the back inside. I had a lot of friends. I was in engineering, so it was a very wide array of different belief systems there, and I befriended some of my coworkers, classmates, and so I was curious and wanted to know more about their culture, and I just went just to watch and see what happens, and I was in awe because it was so different than anything that I had ever been exposed to, and here they were believing it, just as strong. They were, participating with all of their gusto, and I was sitting there in the back like, wow, they're just like I was, and just like, my family was. It's the same as we had, just a completely different belief system. And so that's what started my initial questioning about my Christianity and why I held it so dear and so true when they held theirs the same, and we were completely different. Like, it was so much difference that was there, but it was an awesome looking service, though. It was cool.
Well, and I think that's what drew me to Mormonism. It's a restoration. It's the belief that Jesus Christ continues to live, that he visited Joseph, and see, it's so difficult not to mention Joseph Smith, but
I know, because so much of the religion is based on these revelations that this one guy got. And I mean, I'm sure you understand, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I'm sure you have a sense of how unlikely the story, or how unconvincing the story of Joseph Smith is to a lot of people who aren't approaching it from a faith position.
Well, and you have to have faith, and that
and that's the problem. I was just talking to another caller a few minutes ago, where I was talking about this notion of faith that that there's this assumption that it's a good idea to, lacking a good reason to believe something, just believe really hard, and then it will be true. What?
But I do have good reasons, Russell.
Okay, but you haven't really presented any.
I'm sorry. I even talked, when I talked with Matt, I mentioned that I read the Book of Mormon. I even went to the South Park show.
Yeah.
Or well, it's not the South Park show, but it's the Broadway show.
The musical?
South Park Boys.
Are you talking about the Broadway musical or the South Park episode with it? It's a great show, right?
Oh, it was. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. In fact,
Yeah.
when my wife and I were out in the car after watching the show, my face hurt, and I thought, "Why does my face hurt?" And it's because we were laughing so hysterically.
But I mean, I'll
was-
tell you something that I took away from the Book of Mormon musical, which
Okay.
I'm going to try not to spoil it because if people haven't seen it, they should. But there's this part at the end where these kids who have been very earnest believers in Mormonism have sort of accidentally developed their own weird offshoot of Mormonism, right?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
and then Elder, is it, which one is
Cunningham.
No,
I
the other
couldn't
one.
say.
I mean, the really earnest kid. I think it's Elder Price, right? Sorry,
Yes,
I don't know
Elder
why I'm
Price.
looking at you.
I'm gonna say,
yeah.
I can't help it.
But he says something like, it doesn't matter what we believe or, whether God is real or not. It just matters that we believe something that makes us happy, which in a way is a kind of a positive, inspiring message probably to some people. But also to me, it kind of highlights how a lot of people don't really care if they're believing what is true or not. They just care about the way that belief makes them feel. And I think that there's a parallel between the real Mormonism, and I'm making air quotes for people who are listening to the audio,
Yeah.
and the variant of Mormonism that Elder Cunningham comes up with. I think they're kind of coming from the same place. They're both kind of silly stories that are hard to swallow, but then they make all the people who believe them feel like they've discovered something important and personal to them.
So in your mind, Joseph Smith, like Elder Cunningham, was using his imagination.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, well, and that's what
this
Elder
conversation
Cunningham
is going to be a
says,
lot more fun for people to listen to if they have seen the show. But
yeah, and when I talked to Matt, he kind of ripped me a new one, frankly, concerning faith.
Oh, that's so unlike that.
That faith was unreliable, and
I agree with that.
True faith. Well, and I argued that true faith is necessary, and he said, "Well, I can't. I don't want to put words in his mouth."
I don't recognize true faith as a concept that has any meaning.
Yeah, well, that's what he said, and
Okay.
I guess I've been struggling with that, and
Well,
right,
So
I guess my point was I fixated too much on Joseph Smith and on the Book of Mormon, and I did not focus on Jesus Christ.
it wouldn't have made any difference. I can tell you that right now. Like, it's the same
Jesus.
thing I was calling I was telling the last caller when he was frustrated that he couldn't seem to communicate his atheism properly to a believer. I'll tell you the same thing that I told him, which is basically from the other side. You're going to be disappointed a lot if you think that there's some special thing that you can say to people that will make them suddenly see the light. I know that Mormonism in particular is full of stories of people who are skeptical, and then you say just the right thing to them, and suddenly they're like, aha, it's all so clear now. But that doesn't really happen in real life all that much. So
yes, that's what we call it, bearing testimony. And
okay.
As a convert, I look for opportunities to share my testimony. And you're right, sometimes your words do fall on deaf ears.
Right.
And I think maybe people they're not tuned into the right station, so to speak. They're unable to feel the spirit like I am.
I mean, maybe, but it's also possible that you are basing a bunch of claims on things that aren't really true, and they're not. They're just not buying it.
Well, now, have either of you gentlemen read the Book of Mormon?
I've read some of it, but I'm not gonna. I think we've had, now that you've had a couple of calls, I'd say try again later. So And maybe we'll go deeper into the Book of Mormon next time. Okay?
Well,
All right.
okay, I'll pray for you.
Okay, we'll let you know if it works. See ya. Okay, probably the last caller. We got, 7 minutes until an hour and a half, and then we are all going to go meet at Star of India here in Austin. And we're going to go with Cameron in Pennsylvania.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
Doing all right.
Hey, good to hear. So my question, it actually kind of goes with the last caller, I guess you could say. How would you answer a person who is a theist who would say that they know that God exists? So in other words, they don't just believe that God exists, they actually claim to know that God exists.
What would you say?
I started asking how they were able to come to that conclusion and listen to what they have to say. And with the few conversations I have that have kind of started in that vein of where, I know God is real and because X, Y, Z. And a lot of times when that occurs, I end up kind of coming back to say, well, you said you know it because of X, Y, Z, but this other person has a different belief system and they believe it for X, Y, Z. Now, how am I supposed to differentiate who's correct and who's not? What method can I use to determine who's correct in that aspect? Y'all both believe just the same. You're both just as strong believers. So how am I supposed to decide which? What method can I use?
Right. I mean, you can say, I understand that you are very confident in this belief, but your confidence alone doesn't convince me. So what is it that convinced you?
So I've actually had some experience in that, and I've pressed that line of logic, and I've also gone in the route of, you're so confident in this. If you look at other religions around the globe, Islam, Hinduism, you can clearly see that people are as just as confident as you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel as though when I push that, it doesn't help my case, in that it just it more pushes people into their camp of, I guess the people I'm talking to would be in Christians, and it would push them more into their camp of, I guess you could say the most general response I get is, they have their religions, but we have Jesus Christ, and he is obviously more pure than these other religions. And I've kind of had a tough time getting past that, because I know that's, pardon my French, it's kind of bullshit, but I can't figure a good way to respond to it.
It depends on where the conversation is coming from, because I mean, you may see it as not that productive that they're sort of hunkering down into the defense of their personal religion and saying, oh, well, we have Jesus. But you'd be surprised at how far you can get just by saying, basically, well, Jesus isn't that convincing to me. I've said this a few times on the show already just today, but if somebody is if somebody cares about convincing you, you should make them work for it. If they don't care about convincing you, then you may not necessarily have anything to talk about, because you could arrive at a point where they're like, well, I'm really sure that Jesus exists and loves me, and you go back at them saying, well, I'm not sure of that, and I don't see any reason to believe that, and they say, well, it's just true, and you say, okay, so how about The Walking Dead?
Yeah,
because
for sure.
you can recognize sometimes that conversations aren't going anywhere, And sometimes it's a win just not to give up ground and get frustrated. But it depends, because if they're really trying to convince you, then you should make it clear that they have to do some work to get you there. And just repeating, oh yeah, well, Jesus is true, doesn't cut it for an atheist.
And another thing I would say is if they're giving that line of I would say line of attack, but that type of reasoning to you, then another question to pose is, well, if I have this religion and I give the same thing that you just told me about the religion that I believe, how likely is that to convince you that my religion is true and not yours? How convincing would that actually be? Basically trying to let them kind of self-reflect on the evidence that they presented you with and how convincing it really is if it came from another party going towards them, you know?
Yeah. And if you want to shake a theist out of their certainty and this sort of going round and round about yes it is, no it isn't kind of thing, you could always be a little flippant, which I do sometimes, and say something completely off the wall and just match their certainty with equal certainty. Like, well, you know what? I talked to God last week and he told me he doesn't exist. I mean, you know, they are making this claim based on nothing. And so it's not unreasonable for you to mirror back what that sounds like to you.
Right. I do understand what you're saying in that respect, but if I can play devil's advocate on that, wouldn't me playing that card also more or less come off as arrogant?
Well,
you know, that,
sure, but what's more arrogant than and believe me, I've been accused of being arrogant. I'm well aware that this is a problem, but. But they're the person that wants to be taken seriously by you. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to telegraph the fact that you don't take them or their position seriously. Because at least if they are stuck saying the same things over and over again, it can get the message across that they're going to have to try something else. And that'll stop them from wasting your time.
Yeah, I understand what they're saying, that would make them perhaps reconsider their position.
Yeah, and anyway, they're arrogant. Why do you care if they think you're arrogant?
Yeah, it's a fair point. You called me on that one.
But it depends. It depends on what kind of working conversational relationship you want to have with this person. It depends on what kind of outcome you think you can reasonably get out of them. And nobody can just tell you this is the right thing to say. You kind of have to judge the conversation for yourself.
Yeah, and if I can, I am talking about my parents, actually. Yeah, I'm 21 years old in college, and I was raised as a Lutheran. So I've been an atheist since probably 18. I went to like a Christian college, and I recognized even probably before I went there that it was incorrect and that they weren't actually teaching real education. But I've been, as my colloquy suggests, I've been struggling to tell them what I think and why I think they're wrong, and that has been kind of a struggle. But I think you're right in that maybe portraying the same level as a confidence in their proposals would help in that regard.
Yeah, now bear in mind, if you're having these conversations with your parents, my advice might be a little different, which is you might want to consider whether this conversation is not only productive in the sense of people convincing each other, but productive in terms of what kind of relationship you want to keep having with your parents. Because if this comes down to people yelling at each other, sometimes just remaining civil and making some topics off limits is better than trying to win the argument. And I would say
Yeah,
that twice as much if this was somebody you were married to. That's just good marriage counseling in general.
Yes, I think if there's one thing I've learned from the whole situation, it's that if I do get married, it would be to someone who more or less shares my beliefs with me.
That's not a bad plan.
Yes, that's what I think.
Yeah, but we are kind of out of time and should wrap up. So you want to say something quick, or Phil, you want to throw something out there?
No, just like Russell said, that's it's a lot to consider since it's your parents. That's the relationship that you have with them. Also there's education. Funds if it's a relationship on that part. Like how important is it to you to stress that? Because you said that you were trying to explain yourself, I guess your atheism to your parents, and I guess defend it or challenge theirs. But do you feel that you have to do so? Or is that something that you started, or that conversation? I guess this is you dragging out the call a little bit longer, but I was just curious how why you felt that you had to necessarily explain yourself to your parents or have this conversation.
So essentially, I would say that the conversation more or less started around. I guess I would say it coalesced more around
I think we're going off in another direction, and we do have to wrap up.
I think you're right. Yeah. No, I know you guys are over time. I don't mean to take up more time than I need to.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
I think you answered my question more than.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
And thanks for calling.
All right, Gam.
And Adam, who was our last Theist caller, I'm sorry, we're not going to talk to you tonight. Try again next week. And so thank you, Phil, for being my co-host today. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while, I guess.
And
it's been a minute since the last time. Yeah.
Okay, so
all right.
We'll see you all at Star of India. Thank you, audience, for being awesome.
All that good stuff.
And all right. See you next week on the Atheist Experience.
All right.
This is Russell Glasser, host of The Atheist Experience. The Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.